Code to the cloud, live transcript. Is that enable? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's me. Just to reiterate, I'm going to read through it and talk about it. But before I do it, are there any practical questions either in chat or any raising hands or just speaking about any questions you may have already had and having already read it, something that might focus my comments a little. Yeah, I think we've got Sonia and then Elisa. Go ahead, Sonia.
Mine is less so about the content and more so about like the essay. So structurally, like, do you have a page limit or a word count that you want us to adhere to?
Oh yeah, thanks for that. I should have put that on the prompt, and I will. My general sense of it is 5 to 8 pages, with a page being approximately 250 words. 5 pages, I would say, is a minimum. 8 pages is not a strict maximum. If you're feeling like if you're in the groove and you're kind of filling out an argument, and you find yourself moving a little bit past 8 to 9 or 10, that's fine. The trick is to feel like you're using that extra space to complete your argument. As you part of the challenge of the prompt, is picking your clips. And I would take a little bit of time with that, because well chosen. There's so many different ways to do it. I have no set notion of what your 4 best clips would be. So it's really about you trying to match up what you think about the question, the way you want to try and respond to the question. That's going to bring you to your clips. And roughly speaking, with clips, you're looking for repetition with a difference. You're looking, and this is true of a lot of genre studies, and we'll notice this when we get more into film noir, which, by the way, I have posted the first commentary on Detour, which is our first noir. You don't have to worry about that right now. You don't have to worry about that this week. This is the week to do the midterm, but it's there. And our next Monday class, a week from tonight, will be on introducing film noir and on Detour. And I'll be doing a lot of repetition with a difference. Like, how is this not melodrama? How is melodrama not film noir? What are their different priorities? What are their different emphases? But again, you don't have to worry about that right now, since the midterm is all about melodrama. So 5 to 8 to 10 even. Yeah, I'm just talking on the class thing here. Yeah, so just that. Do you have a follow-up to that, Sonia? Or is it Sonia or McKenna? Yeah, this is Sonia. Yeah, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that was it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay. That's good. And who else in there? Hand up a minute ago.
It was me.
Okay, go
I was
ahead.
gonna kind of ask the same thing, but I think you'll
Mhm.
probably go through it if you said that you're gonna
Yeah,
read through the instructions anyway. I just was gonna ask if you could just kind of elaborate
a little.
on the prompt a little bit.
Which I've kind of started to do, I guess, by telling you that picking your clips will matter, and you're looking for repetition with a difference. And I'll say more, and I will read through the midterm as well. But just as I think about it generally, clearly with these 2 movies, they're melodramas. They have a particular crisis, and it's about inequality. Obviously, it's about economics, family, opportunity, and roughly speaking, the unresolvable problem that the melodrama takes on. And this gets into reinscription as well. Is how can the melodrama appear to take us through some kind of gratifying, if not transcendent, something bigger than the presumed problem of black and white and of inequalities. And so both these movies will both especially the 1939 movie was way ahead of its time, to the degree that it even foregrounded at all that passing as white or being black, or why you might pass as white, because it's in both movies the case is it's not surprising that this girl wants to pass, although both the melodramas try and front load the mother-daughter, the loyalty to the mom. They try and front load that to suggest that, in the end, she needs to learn that in order to be true to herself, she can't pass. But that begs the question of what does that even mean, to be true to yourself? Because there's a coercion going on that both of the mothers, both of the Black mothers in both films are shown as being somewhat sad about being Black, but having learned that it's important to accept it and in a way not question the ways of God. That's implied, particularly in the 1939. Let me get to Aidan's point too before I read. The prompt says we had to choose 2 scenes from each film, 4 scenes in total. Does this mean we're only required to discuss about imitations of life and one other melodrama? So I decided, I think when I was introducing this, I said you'd be referring to the melodramas that we've already seen, and you may, but I'm not going to make you pick clips from movies that we've already seen. You can refer to them, and I refer to them in the prompt, but the 4 scenes, the 2 each, are going to be these 2 versions of imitation of life. And so you won't do a literal scene analysis from any of the movies, but if you want to refer to Safe at some point or refer to Charlotte, having sort of her triumphant emergence from under the dark cloud of her mother, because remember that with melodrama, the social problem is interchangeable. In a way, the mechanics of melodrama doesn't really have anything to say about what the content is. So for the function of melodrama, it doesn't matter whether it's an oppressed daughter of a rich white woman, or the oppressed African-American daughter who's not being allowed to pass as white. For melodrama, it goes to work on an unresolvable problem of modernity and takes us through an apparent solution that also somehow leaves the problem in place. Because if you think about it, even at the end of now Voyager, Charlotte seems to have found a solution, but it's a very contrived solution. She and Jerry are not to pursue their romance. Tina will stay with her. The absent mother of Tina that we've never seen will somehow remain absent. Jackwith is somehow presiding over all of this and needs to be appeased. Charlotte didn't get married. Charlotte didn't have a child. And all of this, everything about the situation, and we even suggested in our class discussions that she is doing a version of her mother. The movie tries to be very clear that she's not going to treat Tina the way she was treated. In fact, her whole point is to not treat Tina the way she was treated. But that can have a strange doppelganger effect where your determination to rescue a young girl that reminds you of yourself, and do so by doing for her all the things you wish had been done for you. That can be the intent, and but it may not be the result, because the forces, the traumatic forces, are not all 100% conscious. So Aidan, did I address that enough for the moment? Okay. Are there other hands up? I can't see everybody. Let's see. Let me do this different view. What if I do the gallery? Okay, so now I can sort of see everybody. So I don't see any actual hands up for the moment. So what if I go to the actual midterm, and then I'll comment as I go, and then at the end of it, you can also feel free to type in the chat box as I'm doing this, and I may not break off to address your typed remark as you type it, but I'll be going back to the chat just to see what you came up with. So so the first part is the lines, the links, and I open with with trying what I like to call setting the table. Modernity is characterized by de-sacralization and disenchantment. The price of instrumental rationality is that all sense of wonder or miracles or the possibility of divine intervention has drained out of everyday experience. So one thing to notice about, and this is true of my lecture style as well, these sentences are they could almost be numbered, but I didn't want it to look, it's like, because of this, then this, and because of that, also this, and then this follows that, and then because of all of that, there's this, so it's a kind of a bowling ball going down the stairs. So don't, you want to try and follow the rhythm. I'm describing a function and a mechanic. So I begin by giving you the atmosphere out of which melodrama emerged. Melodrama didn't create these issues with modernity and de-sacralization and disenchantment. Melodrama is a reaction to it. What we could even call it a symptom formation, a compensatory fantasy that's meant to offset the effects. So, modernity is de-sacralized. Melodrama attempts to re-sacralize. So the price of instrumental rationality, etc. So in a world, it's the world I just outlined, where everything can be explained and all value can be standardized, there appears to be a great opportunity for accumulation, but little opportunity for personal growth, because, and these transitions are important, because the only metric for measuring, quote, wealth is fiscal and material. So that's a bracketed idea of wealth. It's not that it doesn't measure wealth. It measures, it's like the Chinese have a saying that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And once you define what wealth is, and it's strictly only in relation to accumulation, then other things that potentially have a degree of wealth to them simply don't register. They're not measurable. And which is not to say they don't exist. It's just to say they don't show up with the metric. It's like that moment in Safe where the doctor says, where she says, it's the chemicals. And he says, I know, but it's just not showing up on the tests. That's a kind of a classic, if the instruments we have can't measure it, there's nothing there, which isn't true. And melodrama in particular is striving to suss out the things that the metric is unable to recognize. So that voiceover at the beginning of American Beauty, where look at me and look how sad I am, and this is the high point of my day, and I'm going to be dead in 24 hours, but it's okay. I'm actually dead now. And so from outside the bracket of Lester's existence, so the visual is giving us Lester's sense of himself before the events that we're about to see have transpired. So Lester is looking at Lester, but the Lester, it's a transcendent Lester looking at an everyday Lester, and the everyday Lester still, it hasn't occurred to that Lester yet that there's anything beyond what he takes to be his horizon, as the disinterest of his family, the kind of boring, insignificant job, and so on. So Hollywood melodrama attempts to compensate for these painful constrictions of modern experience by rediscovering and then recentering the sacred within the secular. I've gone to italics here to kind of help you to see the way this is embroidered. It's not just that melodrama rediscovers the sacred; it puts it back into the center. It's not, it's been beyond the periphery. What happens when if you re-center the sacred? And you can arguably that's what happens to Charlotte and Lucy. With Lucy, it's Cheng Huan in a way who recenters her physically and literally, brings her to his house, to the bed upstairs, dresses her, gives her the doll and the flowers to hold. And in the process of doing that, he uses her to re-sacralize his world by putting her at its center. And oh yeah, so such a recentering dislocates how attitudes in modernity make sense of the world. And this is one of the reasons you get, with genre, you get this cognitive dissonance, because the recentering is also a dislocation. You can't recenter something else and knock out what was in the center and not have a feeling of dislocation. One of the biggest differences between melodrama and film noir, I'll just make this case without getting into noir, is that in film noir, the dislocation is presented as what the world really is. In melodrama, the dislocation is presented as a temporary breakdown that's a necessary prologue to discovering what the world really is. Whereas there is no elsewhere, there's no transcendent in noir. So the resulting breakdown either leads to redoubled efforts to embed one's self in the values of modernity, both Carols, I think you could say, in American Beauty and Safe, for instance, or leads to the abandonment of an entire way of being, followed by a journeying forth, a sort of a now Voyager, to renew one's self, Lester in American Beauty and Charlotte in now Voyager. The resulting emotional impact that melodramas have on audiences can be usefully compared to religious ecstasy, the sort of feeling that Ricky Fitz finds so overwhelming he feels, quote, his heart will burst. The evocation of ecstasy through a combination of plot, image, and soundtrack serves to cast light on a hitherto unseen and therefore unknown alternative means of valuation. So that italicized phrase takes us back really to the first sentence of the prompt, that the problem with the de-sacralized, disenchanted world is all alternative means of valuation have been not just repressed, but well, maybe repressed, but in any event, not thought of. It's not like people are sitting around saying, maybe I should try a different valuation system. It doesn't, in general, it just doesn't occur to anyone that there is a different valuation system. This is something that gets traced out in a movie like The Matrix, where Neo just has a feeling that there's something wrong, that there's something else. So this new valuation, namely the power of sacrifice, manifests itself as an unsuspected or long forgotten opposing force to the exclusionary logic of investment and accumulation that underlies both capitalism and the organization of subjectivity in modernity. Now, exclusionary logic, I think, is particularly important in Imitation of Life, the two versions of Imitation of Life, because the melodrama struggles with, on the one hand, saying it's not fair the way that Paola is excluded, but it will also try and transfer the problem of that inequality to the larger sense of, well, it's hard to know God's plan. And this is one of the disadvantages, I suppose, of any transcendent system, is that it can acknowledge social inequities, but there's always a temptation for it to say, this won't always be so. This is only on this earth. And you see that a lot in the Bible, for instance, where you'll have Christ saying it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. And so there's a sense that you can be incredibly rich, but your afterlife will be terrible, and you can have a terrible life on earth, and your afterlife will fully compensate for that. So the other famous remark of Christ is, the meek shall inherit the earth. The ones that didn't have a good life will win in a way, and they'll win for infinity, not just for their lifespan. So that's a tricky logic, because and you'll notice both imitations of life end with the funeral of the mother, and she accumulated her savings. She didn't seem very interested in money, either from the pancakes or from the acting. She seems to just want to stick with her maid salary, because she's saving it all up for beautiful funeral. Okay, so let's see. So the exclusionary logic of investment and accumulation. The result is that hitherto dispirited individuals, Lester, Charlotte, most obviously, uncover in themselves a faith in some sort of elsewhere, an elsewhere devoid of monetary gain, and therefore incapable of being accounted for by the metrics of modernity. And notice that is a function that could be fulfilled by a notion of heaven, where money doesn't matter. And so the melodrama, it's a way for the melodrama to use a very old theological precept and attempt to use it to offset the inequities of modernity. And an incapable, okay, but also an elsewhere replete with a priceless rediscovery of an overarching significance beyond the ordinary give and take of the everyday, give and take being the transactional, the accumulative. The overarching significance makes it possible to view suffering and loss as a crucial emotion. And this is something melodrama achieves fairly well, is Charlotte is suffering in the opening scenes to no purpose. So it's a very painful suffering. But with Jackwith and various others, she will begin to learn from her suffering. It's not so much that Jackwith snaps his finger and she just doesn't suffer anymore. As he himself says, I say, not that way, this way. And one way to interpret that is he's saying there is a point to your suffering. Your suffering has information. In this case, that whatever your mother says, her choices are wrong and destructive of your spirit, and the price of you pretending of struggling to believe that your mother is right and she's only done what's best for you is that you'll have a kind of chronic suffering locked in your room that will have no outlet other than the endless carved boxes of ivory. So the overarching significance makes it possible to view suffering and loss as a crucial emotion. This is one of the biggest issues in all of modernity, by the way, which is that suffering that is not allowed to have significance becomes anxiety, depression, or both. It becomes a stunted emotion, but it's a very powerful force. And just like a river, it can go its natural route, or it can go flooding through a city. It's not that the force of the river is not good or bad. It's how is it channeled? So in fact, the only emotion that can help us differentiate what truly matters, the evocative beauty of an impoverished girl for Cheng Huan, or a plastic bag in the wind for Ricky Fitz, from what simply asserts its importance with no larger context, Carol's couch, upholstered in Italian silk, for example. However, even though melodrama can provoke feelings in the audience, akin to what used to be understood as religious ecstasy, and let me point out that ecstasy means ecstasis, that is to say, to come out of your body. And so to come out of to discover an alternative metric is a way to come out of your body. It's to discover that the horizon of modernity is in fact limited. It's not the entire sky. It has no ability to actually restore this ecstatic wider context that makes it suddenly seem possible for a sacred elsewhere to break through and into, I would say into, not and, I'll fix that, but into a relentlessly secular and disenchanted world. Notice in Broken Blossoms, there's so much imagery of things breaking through. You know, the spirit of beauty broke through. It's the breaking down of a wall. Accordingly, now, you know, because melodrama can't do a do-over with modernity, it can't reset modernity. So it needs to both appear to transcend the problems of modernity and leave those problems in place. Whereby the value system of modernity appears to be miraculously overthrown, but really this effect is more a result of rearrangement rather than revelation. And I think that'll be important in Imitation of Life, particularly in the last 20 minutes of both of these movies. How is what is merely rearrangement filmed, edited to look like revelation? The subtext of both versions of Imitation of Life is the racist exclusionary tactics so fundamental to the unfair distribution of material wealth in modernity and capitalism can somehow be transcended in a manner that also, and paradoxically, restores, preserves, and even strengthens these unfair distribution abilities. And I think embedded in this sentence of mine is that it's worth teasing out for the whole course and for all of the genres is it isn't that racism is an unfortunate side effect of capitalism, one that we should just that is a character flaw or something that we simply need to choose to not do. Racism and capitalism are inextricable. There is no capitalism without racism, because capitalism is a system of unequal distribution of wealth, and racism is the ideology that naturalizes that and makes it appear to be simply the way things are. So we, as a culture, one often takes issue with people who make racist remarks, as they should, but they're just symptoms. And in fact, it's important to shut down racist remarks, not least of all because they draw attention to how racist capitalism is. Which is not to say that people of color or minorities cannot accomplish anything in capitalism. It's just that they're going to have to do so with these racist categories in place. So let's see, the subtext of both versions. Unfair distribution, right. So you are to select 2 scenes of 1 minute or less. And that's important. Less can be more with this. It's not, it's not a 50-page thing here. So think about that when you're picking your clips. If you feel like your case is being made in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, that can be good, because that keeps so don't feel like you have to find one that's a full minute long. Think about, because this is melodrama, you might even think about your clips in terms of tableaus. Is it a clip that achieves a spectacular tableau? I think a scene, you can tell me, but it's still pretty shocking, is the one where Paola's boyfriend confronts her, asks if her, and even uses the N-word quite explosively, and slaps her at the same time, and saying, is that who your mother is? Still a shocking scene, I think, even though that movie was in 1959. And part of what's, I think, shocking about it is, and this is where Douglas Sirk is pushing the envelope, and not unlike Safe, Sirk's version of Imitation of Life is both a melodrama and a critique of melodrama. Because a scene like that is hard to you can't unsee it, no matter how much the rest of the movie goes forward to try and smooth it out. So let's see, the first scene that you pick in both cases should illustrate breakdown, where the pernicious force of exclusionary logic / racist tactics threaten to crush the prevailing order of reality in modernity. And then the second, in both cases, should serve to illustrate how melodrama does its work and insists there is a transcendent elsewhere that compensates for such practices while doing nothing to actually alter them or even challenge them. If possible, take note of how Cirque, in the 1959 version, adds a level of meta-commentary, whereby he both produces a melodrama that does what a melodrama should, quote unquote, while also allowing the paradox to still remain in plain sight. And I think that's where Cirque is able to, the reason I would suggest there's a meta-commentary in Cirque's version and much less in Stahl's is that there's less cover-up with Cirque. He lets you see the quote unquote solution, but he doesn't cooperate with that solution with the way the John Stahl version does. I guess I would put it that way. Well, also in the final movement of your essay, reflect on how this evocation of apparently liberating transcendence is still a reinscription, a rearrangement, not a revelation, of the very forces the audience was encouraged to experience as having been overwhelmed and vanquished. Your challenge in this midterm exercise is how well you describe melodrama in action in its three crucial phases. So I may be starting to address your issue, like some of you have, of what's the focus of the essay and so on. This isn't an essay on racism or capitalism. It's on this apparatus of melodrama, and roughly it's three crucial phases, and you're going to show them in operation. So there's a lot of context here, and I think the context is necessary in order to see the work of the apparatus. But the function of the scenes you select, why you select them, and how you refer to them is to give an illustration of the apparatus. So let's see, where am I? Still a reinscription and rearrangement. Your challenge in this midterm exercise is how well you can describe melodrama in action in its three crucial phases. Now, there could be more phases. One could talk about this, but for the purposes of the midterm, this is good enough. I mean, this is kind of middle of the road, crucial phases. So you can rely on this, because you need a structure for a relatively focused essay. So one is that demonstration of the problem, breakdown, apparent resolution of the problem through sacrifice and revelation, and 3, evidence. This is rearrangement rather than revelation, more overt in Cirque's version, but still a subtext in Stahl's version. And then I give you my little pep talk. Remember to enjoy the movies as well as your own discussion of them. And then I'm trying to bring this into the present in the context of instrumental rationality at the university as an institution. The purpose of the midterm is to establish a grade and a differential between you and between and among you and your classmates. And that's the only metric a GPA is good for. And it's a very limited metric. You've heard me talk about this in other ways. But the true value of the exercise beyond GPA will be to also find an elsewhere beyond this measurement of value, where value unaccounted for by your GPA and unsuspected by it resides. There is no official class on Monday. I will open the room 7 to 8. That's what we're doing right now. I read the prompt, entertain comments, questions, record the session, etc. Okay, so I tried to editorialize a lot, as I went along and tried to do so even with an eye toward how to execute the midterm, how to write the essay. Let's see. I see two comments at least. So let me just read these and comment, and then maybe get some others. The prompt says we had to choose two scenes. I guess I did this one. Yeah, I did that. Okay, so and then Elisa has added, just to make sure I'm understanding the prompt right, I'll give an example. Could you say that one breakdown is Paola being bullied for her race? The rearrangement would be her continuously trying to run away and envision a world where she is white, a life without her mother. And the evidence of this being a mere rearrangement is shown in, for instance, how she is beaten when she is caught in a lie about it by her boyfriend, or how she's only able to accept her race when her mother is dead. The problem isn't actually solved. Yeah, that's full of a good awareness of how to set this up. At least I, particularly, I think you really hit on something important when you say why the two things that are incompatible or appear to be incompatible is that she has to choose that if she passes, she loses her mother. And this is a way that melodrama can relocate a social issue into a private, and in a way it blames the victim. Like, why? And you have to ask yourself, why is that the choice? Why is her choice? First of all, why does she have to pass? Because in a way that passing reinforces that Blackness is inferior, because if it weren't, why would you try and pass? And you can see, particularly with Paola, it does teach her, well, a hatred of being Black, which occasionally spills out as a hatred of her mother. But somehow the whole issue of why is passing even, why is it so tempting? That kind of gets left aside. The melodrama just, and particularly in the first imitation of life, the mother's even says, we don't know why, but it's just the way it is. So I wish you would accept it, and you'll be less miserable if you could accept it. And that's a kind of sleight of hand. There's so much, everybody urges Paola that her life would be so much better if she would just accept that she's Black. But what does that even mean? Except because she's not really just accepting she's Black, she's accepting that she can be regarded as inferior. Does that give you some confidence in how you're going about this, Elisa? Yes, good. Other comments or questions about it's supposed to be fun. I was kind of fun to write the prompt because I had to really push myself to be incredibly concise about material that I've been going on about for hours and hours. so I really stripped it down. I wrote it like 3 different times and kept, I felt a little like a film editor. I kept editing out and deleting and making sure I didn't have false starts, and just trying to get each sentence to interlock with the one that came next. So how should we, Sandra, how should we go about citing for any quotation? So keep it simple. This isn't a research paper per se, so you don't, if you say, the camera moves into a close-up and Paola says, I don't want to be Black, there's no real need to reference anything. It's perfectly clear. And if you give a shout out to one of the other movies, it's really, as long as you've mentioned that it's from Safe. Now, if you want to grab something else from the text or even from the class, again, you don't need to be specific about the citation, but you could say, as was mentioned in class, or as was mentioned in the text about melodrama. And then you can do a direct quote from my text on melodrama, and all you got to do is put quotes around it and say the text on melodrama. So keep the focus. I want you use all the material, but keep the focus on developing your argument, and don't worry too much about the apparatus of a research paper, which is important, but that's not what this midterm is. Yeah, and someone has a hand up. Oh, Elisa, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing. I think the only reason why I was a little bit confused was just because when I was reading the prompt and it mentions like the quote unquote wealth aspect of it, I thought that that meant that we were limited to talking about like the consequences they face in terms of like the economic unfairness between
Oh,
like
no.
the different types
Okay.
of privilege.
Right. No, you're not limited by that at all. And in fact, it's your comment's an interesting one because all genres attempt to bracket things off. And, now Voyager also tries to make it an economic problem, that her mother doesn't give Charlotte any money. And then when Charlotte inherits all the money and starts, donating it to Cascades and so on, she's able to come into her own. But that also is a blind. I mean, the real destruction is to the people, and I think that's the other question that gets begged, particularly in both versions of Imitation of Life, is the one thing to pay attention with melodrama, if not in this midterm and in these particular movies. Notice when melodrama alleviates trauma for the characters. I mean, it's particularly obvious in the first Imitation of Life. Like here, Paola, her entire life has lived through the kind of ravages, and then in the space of a scene or two, she appears to somehow be fine. And she's not even on camera when it's just mentioned in passing that she's gone back to the college. Why is not even what's changed? I know we have some idea of what appears to have been. I mean, the thing it's hard to get away from is how convenient it is for everyone that the mothers died. For Paola, she no longer has to worry about her mother showing up with her lunch or showing up to see where she's working. And for the White family too, you get the impression on a certain level that they're saying, well, sure, now you can pass, because there's nothing that's going to out you. So we as a white family don't have to worry about it either. So that's a kind of strange, the role of Paola's mother is really interesting. Whether that is what you get into more with the midterm or not, I don't mean to suggest that a good answer has to deal with that, but it is definitely there. So does that get at that, Lisa? Because I don't want you to feel limited, especially from pursuing some of your own insights.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's just because like the example I gave you was kind of the outline I had originally wrote, like for the first movie at least. And then I reread the prompt and I was like, oh wait, I think I'm doing this wrong. So I like rewrote it completely, but I think I like this one better. So
okay, I haven't seen the other one, but I like this one. So this seems to, I can see the energy in these comments on your part that you're making these connections, and that's why I keep calling it a prompt and not an essay question, because what I'm hoping is that I've given you a lot, of course, but I'm trying to prompt you, trying to get you started, trying to give you enough so that you want to get some traction with this prompt in a way. Like at what point is it you doing the work and not just the prompt? I mean, that would be another goal for how to take on this midterm. Okay, what else is going on out there? Any hands? No? Or okay, so you've got this week to do it, to watch the movies, to rewatch the movies, to rewind them. I wouldn't spend too much time going over past tapes or in open classes and so on. Because at this point, I think, unless you literally didn't see a tape, and then if you didn't see the tape on safe, you might take the time to watch it, to catch up, so to speak, because you'll just feel more oriented. It's not so much that I say anything about Imitation of Life in the safe tape, because I don't think I do, but I say a lot about reinscription and what is a melodrama that has a meta commentary about the very work of the genre that the movie is also performing. It's a kind of if genres could be self-conscious, a safe and Cirque's version of imitation of life they are quote unquote self-conscious. They're genre conscious of their own construction. Okay, so are we good? We're coming up on 8 o'clock now. I will still respond to anything that comes into leonardgary@hotmail.com, and I can post that answers on the announcements, so it's fair to, everybody gets the same information. I will post this open class so if you have classmates who missed it, let them know that I'll get the link up there so they can sit down with it. But other than that, this is your week to have fun with these two movies and hopefully enjoy the fact that you're moving through two melodramas that I didn't lecture on in any depth, and so this is your chance to also feel a degree of competence in the material, and that you've learned, and you can do things now that you couldn't have done even 4 weeks ago before the class began. Oh, hi, Mohammed. The film and lit major. We just had a meeting with all the deans, and everybody seems very happy about wanting it to go through. We have to connect the dots, but the deans are green lighting to use a film phase. They're green lighting it all the way, so there's no question it'll go through. It's a question. It's more about how quickly and whether we'll have to deal with feedback or not. We're about to start a job search for a new tenure stream professor in what's called the Global South. So we're looking for somebody who's a specialist in cinema of the Global South, which is very big. So if transferred to St. By the way, I got your note, and I'm happy to write a recommendation about that, Mohammed. I didn't get back to you. That's an interesting question. I think quite possibly yes. I guess I'll have to double check with the with the organizers. There's no question you're allowed to take classes on any of the 3 campuses, and I believe you can have up to 50% of your classes on a campus other than the one where you're actually enrolled. So I think I have a feeling that it would work, because a lot of people have 2 majors, for instance. So if you had a major down at St. George, I think it's an interesting idea, and maybe this is something that will start to happen more, particularly with, we're not going to be on all Zoom class forever, but I have a feeling that some Zoom things are going to stay, and I think it's going to help with geography a little bit. The Don Valley Parkway is a very forbidding separator of the 3 campuses traditionally. It's really hard to take advantage of the other 2 campuses that you don't have, because you have to get there, and there's often like a prof you like, or a suite of classes that you like. And I think there's something exciting that could happen post-COVID where a student can get the best of the 3 campuses. That'll be new and kind of exciting. I'll look into that specifically, and meanwhile, as I said, I'm happy to write that letter. I'm not sure where I send it or anything, so you can email me about that. Okay, so I think we're in pretty good shape. So it's right around 8 o'clock. Would we need to include screenshots of the scenes? Not a requirement, but might. I don't want to add requirements, but let me say sort of casually that I think forcing yourself to pick a screenshot from each of your 4 might be a good exercise in focusing why you picked that clip in the first place. There's no necessity to include it, but you might want to do it for yourself. Like, what's the focal point of the clip that you chose? And that might keep you focused, and using that term deliberately, on why this clip, and certainly the scene where the boyfriend hits her, there would be some very, in fact, that's brilliantly edited, that scene, and she sees her own reflection in the windows behind her, and Cirque really uses the window reflections to kind of fracture and fragment what's going on in that scene. So, but I hate to put in too many requirements that like there has to be a still, because I, like as with Elisa, I don't want to pull you away from or knock you off your own rhythm in pursuing your insights about this material. Okay. Anything else? Remember, if you think of something 2 minutes after we're gone, email me, leonardgary@hotmail.com. Otherwise, have fun with this. I've taped Detour. I'm probably going to tape Kiss Me Deadly, 1955 noir, Lost Highway, David Lynch, which is super fun. Crazy movie. And then Memento. Noir is incredibly destabilizing. But you know, we'll have the open classes and the taped comments to attempt to stabilize us. I don't know. Sometimes I feel more stable watching film noir because film noir is so destabilizing. I feel, whereas I can feel, and I think this is one reason film noir became emerged, is people almost felt like they were getting gaslighted, that these feel-good movies were making their lives tolerable, and that wasn't necessarily a good thing. But okay, yeah, I'm coming. I gotta run to dinner, but good to see you guys, and I'll be checking my email. So bye for now.